Transmite en su canal de frecuencia modulada e estereofónica multiplex La Voz Radio, desde New Haven, Connecticut, al mundo.
Muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Caprice Taylor Méndez. Welcome. Here we are with Together We Can. My name is Caprice. Aquí con Juntos Podemos, detrás de La Voz Hispana Radio, aquí en New Haven. And we are here live from New Haven through La Voz Hispana 103.5 FM. And thank you once again for turning the dial. And today we have the pleasure for welcoming an advocate on behalf of all of us who believed in our teachers and our parents and our families saying education is important. Get yourself, your education, everything else could easily get washed away except for your education. And education is a tool to defend for yourself, to make sure that you give back to community. We've heard and been inculcated with all of these important messages of education, but it comes at a price in the United States. And so we followed the footsteps of what our parents said. And there's this belief that if you work hard, you can lift yourself out of economic hard times. And many, including myself, believed that to be true. But when it came to getting jobs that made the impact in society and helping other people's lives, it didn't necessarily correlate to making tons of money to pay off the student loan debt in not even 10 years, not even 20 years. In some cases, including mine, 30 years. And so we're here with Crister Estrada Perez, the Executive Director of Student Loan Fund, which aims to organize, invest, and reconstruct. Welcome, Crister.
Gracias por tenerme. It's a pleasure to be here today, hablando de los préstamos estudiantiles, to really be speaking about student debt and how it affects us as a collective. Thank you for having me, Caprice.
What a pleasure. Estamos dando la bienvenida a Crister, que es la directora ejecutiva del Fondo de Préstamos Estudiantil, y la meta es para movilizar, invertir y reconstruir lo que sabemos sobre acceso a educación. Y acá en los Estados Unidos, muchos padres, incluyendo los míos, maestras, profesores, tías y tíos, seres queridos, desde la niñez dicen, tienen que enfocarse en los estudios. El trabajo mío es trabajar como adulto y de ustedes como niños es trabajar en las escuelas, hacer su tarea, aprender y lanzar su carrera. Cualquier cosa que ustedes sueñan pueden ser realidad, pero de lo que muchos padres que no crecieron aquí o crecieron en el tiempo de 1960 no saben de que los precios aumentaron 1000 veces más para ingresarse uno a una institución como universidad o colegio aquí en los Estados Unidos. Y uno nos toma trabajo simplemente porque me van a pagar bastante, pero también si a uno le interesa, tiene curiosidad o quiere apoyar a la comunidad, muchas veces cierto tipo de trabajo no paga lo suficiente para pagar la deuda, la que uno se gradúa, si tiene suerte, de las escuelas, de la universidad, y termina pagando esa deuda no simplemente en 10 años, 20 años, 3 décadas, a algunas personas 4 décadas para pagar esa deuda. Y eso no era la realidad en los 70 ni en los 80 y aumentó muchísimo el precio para educarse uno en los Estados Unidos. Y muchos creen que es falta de igualdad, porque más personas de tasa negra, latinos, indígenas, nos estamos enfocando y estamos haciendo el trabajo donde nos abren las puertas para poder ingresarnos a la universidad, pero terminamos pagando muchas veces más de lo que uno pensaba de que había que pagar. Y hay una cantidad de latinos que no han completado la universidad. Y entonces, a la hora de que uno se gradúa o a la hora de que uno ya no sigue estudiando, tiene que pagar de vuelta esos dólares. Y, Crister, como ¿a qué nivel es de que muchos estudiantes se encuentran tener que pagar mensualmente una deuda estudiantil? ¿Es al nivel de, por ejemplo, comprar una nueva computadora o un televisor, un auto o una casa? ¿A qué nivel son los pagos de muchos estudiantes? So, a quick question, Krista, as society often says to children, get your education, go to higher education, but the prices have increased exponentially since the 1970s, since the 80s even, leaving a student indebted upon graduation and having to pay off that student debt, or if you were not able to finish obtaining your diploma from a higher education, you still have to pay off that debt. At what rate are most students making payments after they're no longer enrolled in school? Is it to the level of buying a new computer? Is it to the level of purchasing a car, or to the level of a home? Where does this fall for most people? Do you know?
Absolutely. Sabemos que, vamos a poniéndolo en contexto, lo que dijiste al principio es bien importante. La gente de color, la gente pobre, la gente que vive en las intersecciones de pobreza y ser gente de color que por primera vez están yendo a la universidad. Por ejemplo, yo fui first generation, primera generación, estudiante. Yo tuve que pagar más. We know that we have to pay more than other borrowers. Sabemos que estudiantes de color y estudiantes de bajos recursos terminan pagando más dinero, cogiendo más dinero prestado, acumulando más dinero en interés, right? So they have to borrow more at every stage of the process. They end up collecting more interest because they had to borrow more at every stage.
So you're talking about first generation college going, many families, they're breaking that glass ceiling. Many more Black, brown families, BIPOC families are having children that are graduating, that are enrolling into higher education, but we're finding ourselves in such serious debt. And so you're saying many more. And so feel free to pick one of the languages and I can help in the translation.
I'll do it in English so that it's easier, and then and then you can help with the translation. So student borrowers across the state are, particularly if they're low-income students of color, are going to end up borrowing more at every stage of the process. That means that they're going to end up owing more, and that they're going to end up they are going to end up having more accumulated from their interest rates. And that really translates into the range to answer your question about how much are those payments, those monthly payments. We have seen some as low as $150, but some as high as $700, $800 a month, right? We're talking either, more than car insurance, card notes, sometimes even more than their rent, right? Or their housing. And so it makes it really difficult for borrowers who owe that much debt to buy a home, making first-time home ownership or just home ownership in general really hard for borrowers, and in particular borrowers of color.
And what you're saying, it's so important when we talk about the common good, keeping our perspective open where, what's in it for me kind of mentality that a lot of people have out there. I hear what you're saying and I'm thinking, wow, all that money going into the student loan infrastructure and not our economic, like the markets, not purchasing cars, not buying homes, not buying, new TV sets and all of this that people say, if you purchase, you create jobs. All of that money, 700 to 800 for one individual monthly, not going into our general economy. Talk about all that money being sucked in to the student loan payment machine, but not into our economy, not creating jobs, not supporting. So what's in it for me? Loosening up all that money to have more customers, to have more consumers, more purchases. Like if we were to think of in that selfish level, I'll use the word selfish, what's in it for me is that injection of funds that can go into the consumer capitalistic economic engine, right? That people fail to realize. Sister Krista acaba de mencionar de que lamentablemente cuando para ingresarse uno en las universidades aumentó el costo, también aumentó nuestras familias negras, latinas, primera generación, que se ingresan a la universidad, pero lamentablemente tienen que sacar préstamos y terminan pagando no solamente una gran cantidad en préstamos, más que jóvenes de otras familias, pero también pagan intereses, tasas de interés mucho más altas. Y el nivel de la deuda, sí conocen algunas personas que pagan lo mínimo de 150 al mes, pero hay muchos que también pagan 700 a 800 al mes, casi al precio de lo que uno pagaría para alquilar una casa, para tener un hogar. Y estaba contando a Krista que muchas personas dicen, pero ¿para qué vamos a enfocarnos en la deuda de estudiantes? Ese es el problema de ellos. Pero cuando uno se pone a pensar, es una pérdida de consumidores, una pérdida de personas comprando servicios, productos, apoyar a la economía, a crear trabajos. Y todos esos fondos se van a la industria de deuda estudiantil y no regresa a la economía más grande. Sí, Krista, perdón que te paré. Sorry, I stopped you, but please continue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's absolutely right. And I think, not only are we investing more, we are not investing in our communities. And often what we hear is, well, if we forgive student debt, then rich people will take advantage of that, right? But sorry to break it to folks who say that people who are rich don't have student debt because they don't need to borrow money to go to college. They actually have generational wealth that they can tap into. So what we're having to see is that student debt is not just an issue of it's an issue of working class and middle class folks who often need to borrow money to be able to afford the increase, right? But it's also often what we hear is that it's a young people problem, but it's not a young people problem. It's an intergenerational problem. We have elders, abuelos, tíos, people who have taken out debt, parents to support their young people to finish college, things like Parent Plus loans, which are really hard to have high interest rates, really hard to navigate, right? And so we have an intergenerational issue with our parents, our great-grandparents are having to accrue debt so that they can help the other generation to sort of finish. And so we told people, go to college, get a good job, right? But that's not what's really happening in the economy, right? And so we're leaving all of these borrowers with such a college already costed enough. We didn't have the intergenerational wealth to have the money to pay out of pocket. So we have to borrow more. And then on top of that, we're not really investing in our higher education infrastructure. We are not investing in grants. We're not investing in things that make it easier for borrowers to attend school and for money not to be a barrier once you graduate.
Usted dice de que muchas personas no reconocen de que con esta deuda nos falta invertir en nuestras comunidades. Muchos creen que estos recursos, cuando uno está hablando de eliminar la deuda estudiantil, que uno está hablando de dando oportunidad a los ricos a usar esa oportunidad. Pero Christopher dice, los ricos en verdad no tienen deuda estudiantil. Eso no va a ser ningún abuso de parte de los ricos, porque las personas que necesitan la cancelación de la deuda estudiantil son los de la clase trabajadora, los de la clase media, y es un problema no solamente de los jóvenes, pero es un problema de varias generaciones. Nuestros abuelos, padres, madres han sacado deuda para apoyar a sus jóvenes a que destaquen en una carrera, que tengan un futuro, y los abuelos, los ancianos tienen unas grandes deudas, están endeudados para pagar de vuelta los préstamos educativos, y es tiempo de que nos interesa apoyar a la comunidad. Nosotros que estamos endeudados, no hemos tenido la oportunidad de tener dinero, fondos en el banco para pagar los estudios. ¿Y por qué no hay? ¿Por qué no existen becas gratuitas? Es decir, uno se desempeña en la área académica y si uno necesita dinero, en lugar de sacar una gran cantidad de préstamos, pueden obtener becas donde no tienen que pagar de vuelta, y eso se llama grants. Y existen, pero son pocos que existen. Y como a qué nivel es esta industria de becas estudiantiles, ¿cuáles son las cantidades de dólares que ellos están haciendo con estos préstamos en la manera que existen hoy, con unas tasas de interés que son bien altas? Uno saca, por ejemplo, un préstamo de 10,000 como un estudiante y termina pagando mucho más por muchas décadas por esos 10,000 que uno no tenía en el banco, no tenía en el bolsillo. Es como en la desesperación están tomando ventaja de la gente. And so a question for you, Krister. What is roughly the size of this student loan industrial machine that when you're a student and you are found in moments of desperation where you just need $10,000, and it happened to me my freshman year in school, first generation, I had 3 jobs to put myself through Boston College, and the first semester they were like, you're $10,000 short. If you don't pay, we're going to lock you out of your dorm room and we're going to cancel your meal plan card. And my parents couldn't help. 5 children, 2 before me in college, 3 of us in college at the same time. And we were great students. We behaved, studied, model children. And I get this note. And in the meantime, the football players at Boston College were able to get extra thousands of dollars on their scholarship. They had a scholarship to be football players. They wouldn't pay to go to Boston College, and they got extra $1,000 in their student package, and they didn't have to pay it back. And meantime, I was short, and I was told I'd be homeless and not have food in Massachusetts by myself, and my family was here in New Haven, Connecticut. And so the desperation, I was like, I will take out any loan that I can so I could continue on this lifelong dream of pursuing my higher education.
Yeah.
And so that 10,000, it took years to pay, high interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is this student loan machine?
Mm-hmm.
How much money are they making off of this false dream
Mm-hmm.
of go to school, you'll get yourself out of debt.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually getting yourself into more debt.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in Connecticut, there are around 500,000 borrowers who carry some sort of student debt. Out of those, we have $17.5 billion in student debt altogether that we owe as a state. Connecticut is a high debt state, is the 5th in the nation with the highest debt state. And so what we do know is that Connecticut borrowers are borrowing more because of the lack of infrastructure or money that the state gives for higher education. However, as a nation, we have entered 1.7 trillion, I think last time I checked. I could be a little bit off by a couple of trillions there. But the reality of it is that the student debt crises, and this is just the student debt crises, these are the folks who owe student debt, right? We're looking at trillions of dollars, $1.7 trillion nationwide, which means that is money that is being spent into student debt rather than buying homes, buying cars, providing for, creating safety nets, family safety nets, right? Being able to have savings account. We know that most United States people from the United States are $400 away from an emergency, right? But we're spending so much of that money into student debt. Folks are having to make decisions about, do I pay my student debt or do I eat? Do I pay my rent? It's a very serious conversations that people are having every day, that doesn't get the attention that it should, because it's not only, and also that includes the emotional issues that come with having student debt and the shame that comes with that, right? So in Connecticut, we are a high debt state. We have $17.5 billion in student loan debt as a state. And if anybody in student debt cancellation is Connecticut borrowers.
Oh, so 500,000 in Connecticut are indebted. Mitad de 1,000,000 en el estado de Connecticut, nos cuenta Krister, tienen deuda estudiantil.
Mm-hmm.
Mitad de la población de Connecticut, mitad de 1,000,000 de la población de Connecticut está en deuda. Y acá eso quiere decir, tiene una deuda de 17.5 billones de dólares.
Mm-hmm.
Si nos podemos imaginar 17.5 billones, ¿qué podemos crear acá en Connecticut? Tener una economía prosperosa. Podemos tener, como dijo Krister, familias pueden tener fondos extra en caso de emergencia, guardaditos en el banco, guardaditos en la casa para una emergencia. Y muchos están menos de $400 en un estatus de crisis por falta de $400. Y no más $400 nos está salvando cada mes de estar en esa crisis. 17.5 billones. Somos el estado dentro de los Estados Unidos, el quinto más endeudado en la forma de deuda estudiantil. Y acá en este estado, una de las razones por qué somos el quinto en todo el país en deuda estudiantil es porque el estado de Connecticut es un estado que provee lo menos en apoyo estudiantil a nivel nacional. Y a nivel nacional hay por lo menos una deuda de 11.7 trillones, ni sé cómo se pronuncia eso en español, pero yo creo que trillones, más que billones, y es una crisis a nivel nacional. Y por eso esto es un tema tan importante de hablar sobre este tema. Y yo quiero decir algo que yo aconsejaba a los jóvenes en Connecticut. Siguen sus sueños y no dejen que la falta de dinero, que la falta de dólares paren los sueños académicos, porque graduarse uno tiene más poder en navegar sistemas, en obtener trabajos, los cuales que uno quiere obtener y no que uno necesita tener, porque nuestra comunidad muchas veces nos toca los trabajos que nadie más quiere. Y nos falta seguro médico, nos falta seguro social, todas esas cosas que brinda cuando uno saca su diploma de las escuelas.
Mm-hmm.
Entonces, estamos hablando de un tema muy importante, pero por favor no dejen de luchar para sus sueños. We're speaking to a very important theme around the level of indebtedness. Well, 11.7 trillion, that's astonishing. But I just don't want to dissuade folks from getting their higher education where the degree helps to navigate and apply for jobs that you want, not the ones you have to have. It also provides you opportunities to get Social Security, to get health insurance through an employer if you have your immigration status, right? And all of this is to say education is important, and equally so is to challenge the system to not allow for this level of predatory lending. That is what it is, where you are at fear of not being able to complete your education. And there are things that people don't know. If you failed to pay off your debt from one school that you were like, you know what, I didn't get the support system there, I didn't like the classes there, I didn't like the atmosphere there, I'd rather go to another school. You can't transfer over your credits without finishing paying off those thousands of dollars of debt. So then people go to work, but then they charge you so much in a monthly payments that you're paying off forever, and then you can't get back to school, which is your biggest game plan. Finishing off halfway is worse than never having started, financially speaking. So for the Latino community, that is disproportionately the reality. Que para nuestra comunidad latina, los estudios enseñan de que muchos quieren seguir en la universidad, pero resulta de que donde se ingresaron no era el lugar correcto para ellos, no había suficiente apoyo, o costaba mucho, o era difícil terminar los cursos por cualquier razón. Y de ahí decidan continuar en otra institución que tal vez cuesta menos, pero sin saber de que no pueden seguir en una nueva institución hasta que los créditos se mueven de uno al otro, o si no, empezar de nuevo, encontrarse con más deuda. Y para que los créditos académicos se transfieren a la nueva institución, tienen que pagar a toda la deuda de esa institución, aunque no han terminado los cursos para el diploma de la universidad. Es decir, de ahí tienen que trabajar para pagar esa deuda, y la deuda es muy alta y van a terminar trabajando para pagar esa deuda por años, mientras no están siguiendo los estudios. Y este ciclo vicioso de deuda, lamentablemente, es la historia de muchos latinos en este momento, especialmente aquí en New Haven, aquí en Connecticut, a nivel nacional. Lamentablemente esa realidad nos impacta más de cualquier otro grupo. Y por eso quiero decir mil gracias, Krister, por tu abogacía, por crear, sos una de las fundadoras de Student Loan Fund que existe aquí en New Haven y están luchando para cancelar la deuda estudiantil, a que ya no existe. Y nos puedes contar por qué es tan importante. Hay 10 razones que están promoviendo en la página del web. Y si puedes hablar un poco sobre eso. And so, because of that vicious cycle of indebting ourselves for higher education access, we're not able to finish. And then we have to find jobs that then we are trying to pay off debt and never getting back to completing our higher education path.
Yeah.
And it's a vicious cycle that too many Latinos have found themselves in. When I was in college, we were 10 living in the same dorm, and only 2 of us returned. Yeah. And others totally never went back.
Yeah.
And so part of Student Loan Fund, which exists here in New Haven, you're one of the founders, you're the executive director, and its mission is really looking at canceling the debt, the student loan debt. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us the 10 reasons why we should even consider this, not just for New Haven, not just for Connecticut, but at a national level? This is part of the conversation. Can you share with us these 10 reasons?
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to say before we get to the 10 reasons is that what you articulated about what we call transcript ransom. So we're talking about the student debt crises, which is how much people owe in total student debt. But there's also what we call the second student debt crisis that we don't even have a time to talk about because the big student debt crisis sort of takes over. And is that transcript ransom, meaning that if you can't pay your institutional debt, you can't access your transcripts, you can't transfer, you can't continue your education, you can't finish. So now you're stuck with an institutional debt that you owe to that school, but you are also held responsible for paying back the student loans that you've already borrowed, right? And so we have been advocating at the local level to cancel the ability, to stop the ability of schools to be able to hold their transcripts ransom. Because if you think about the amount of money these borrowers are already borrowing, usually these transcripts are being held for less than $5,000, right? And so it's really impacting our ability.
His whole life. Their whole life trajectory for $5,000.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So we have the student debt crises. We also have the transcript ransom, which, to your point, a lot of Latinos in particular are suffer from that, right? Not being able to transfer to cheaper institutions. I'll give you a real life example. My mother is 47 years old. She went to college after me to finish nursing school. She had to take a 4-year break because she was advised to withdraw from classes, then find out that the advice was wrong, and she ended up owing $7,000 and was unable to finish until many, many years later. And when she was able to finish, she graduated top of her class, right? But she had to wait all of those years to be able to finish while still paying her student debt, right? So those two things are very real, very real.
Krister dice, es importante reconocer el tema de la deuda estudiantil, pero también un término es rescate de transcripción, de que muchas instituciones no dejan transferir los créditos académicos en la escuela de origen, la universidad de origen, hasta que uno termina pagando la deuda. Y esto en verdad sí impacta lamentablemente a la mayoría de los latinos que persiguen estudiando en una institución como una universidad. Y lamentablemente eso le pasó a su mamá, a la mamá de Krister. Ahora tiene 40 años y ella quiso estudiar para hacerse enfermera en la escuela de enfermeras y tomó el mal consejo de una persona aconsejándole de parte de la universidad y le dijo de que ¿por qué no tomas un tiempo de descanso? Y resultó de que inmediatamente tenía que resolver la deuda de $7,000. que ella no tenía y tenía que ponerse a trabajar. Y para poder obtener esos créditos académicos para transferirse a una institución de menos pago para registrarse en esa escuela, menos costos para registrarse en esa escuela, resultó que le tomó 4 años en poder terminar esa deuda y reinscribirse en otra institución con menos costo. Y ella fue de mi parte, ella fue una de las historias de éxito, porque muchos nunca regresan más. De ahí tienen otras cosas que pasan en la vida, tienen hijos, se enferman, tienen más deuda, compran carro, tienen que pagar esa deuda, de ahí viven solos, tienen que pagar esa deuda y cosas pasan.
Y le puedo decir que, lo voy a decir en español porque, y parte de parte de la razón por la que mi mamá pudo volver a la escuela fue porque yo empecé a trabajar en esa escuela y tuve acceso a alguien para que la pudieran ayudar para ya poder empezar y ponerle en un plan de pago. Si yo no trabajo en esa escuela y no tengo esos accesos y conozco a esa gente, mami no puede empezar hasta que ella pague porque no le querían hacer un plan de pago. So it just shows that even in her situation, to your point, it's very lucky. It was a very lucky happenstance, right? That happened. But in terms of like the 10 reasons why student debt should be canceled, number one, it's a national crisis, right? We know it's a national crisis. Es una crisis nacional. Sabemos que la gente está teniendo que están teniendo que tomar decisiones. ¿Qué pagan? ¿Qué no pagan? ¿Verdad? Sabemos que es una national crisis, es una crisis nacional. Sabemos que canceling student debt would advance gender and racial equity, right? Sabemos que cancelar el préstamo estudiantil va a avanzar el género y la equidad, la equidad racial y de género. Sabemos que las mujeres, en particular las mujeres negras, pero las mujeres en general, tenemos las más préstamos estudiantiles. We know that women have the most student debt, and particularly Black women. So canceling student debt is a racial and gender equity issue. It's good for the economy. Es bueno para la economía. Y ya está, it's already targeted. It's already targeted because the people who need student debt are the people who need the cancellation, right? So we don't have to target it anymore. We know that if you have student debt, it's because you couldn't afford to pay out of pocket, right? No one willingly signs over to take out all that money if they have it in the bank, if mom or dad can pay for it. We also know that student debtors are not only young people, older people who live on Social Security, right? We've heard stories of borrowers whose Social Security is garnished because of student debt, because they have student debt. And
I just heard a story yesterday of a coworker of a friend who's Italian American, and they had two children that they put through higher education, and she told the person that I know, my children don't even talk to me, and I still pay the monthly student debt, and this is like 20 years later. Like, this is real.
Yeah, it is. And we know that cancellation will have intergenerational anti-poverty effects. We know that if they cancel student debt today, that leaves more income for families who are middle class, working class, right? There's all this assumption that when you go to college, you're just going to make all this money, right? I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my college education. But to do that, I had to take out 50-something thousand in student debt, which became almost 80,000 right now. Plus, my mother had to take an additional 15,000 Parent Plus loan out, right? So just me as an individual example, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, I wouldn't be here if I didn't go to college, but I wouldn't be here if I couldn't take out all that debt to be able to finish, right? So it leaves borrowers and families, like my mom said to me the other day, y que se supone, when we first found out how much college costs, and I went to Weaver High School in the north end of Hartford, and she said how much it costs, and she said, well, what am I supposed to say to my daughter? No, you can't go to college because we're poor, right? No, your brilliance is not able to be shared with the world, and you're not able to engage in learning because of a price tag. So education is just a right. And in particular, we know that it will disproportionately positively impact Black and brown people and working class people.
And when we think of Eastern Europe, well, I'll just say this. In the United States, when folks are looking at how can we support the common good, they're like, oh, that's socialist. And in reality, Germany is seen as a modern Western civilization model. And Germany says, if you know German from any part of the world, we're going to educate for free our own German population and anyone else wanting to come to Germany to get higher education. I was blown away when I heard about that. Que en Alemania, porque muchas personas creen que, ay, si uno va a cancelar la deuda estudiantil, eso es socialismo. Pero aquí ven, por ejemplo, las prácticas del gobierno de Alemania como una democracia y de que son fuertes en su democracia. Y ellos dicen, ustedes pueden estudiar, si son alemanes, pueden estudiar de gratis aquí en las instituciones de educación, universidades, más la gente en cualquier parte del mundo que sepa hablar alemán, bienvenidos, sin ningún costo.
Wow, wow. And that's something that we see in most of the European nations, right? Either college is extremely affordable, if not downright free, right? As part of their living experiences, this includes higher education, it's K through 12 and higher education. So the models exist, and we have the money and the finances in this country. Often we hear, well, how are we going to pay for it? We have more than enough money to actually cancel student debt and then have some left over, right? We have more than enough to do that. And really that really is pouring into the individual, which is pouring into those communities, which is expanding the ability of those communities to provide for themselves, right? So it's just good business sense. And also it's something that it's done across the world. We wouldn't be the first ones to imagine what higher education is like for free or nearly free, right? So it is unique in our understanding to actually have to pay this much. And in particular with how much student debt has and how much cost of attending has increased over the years, specifically when Black and brown people have used education as a means of creating wealth and as a means of creating access to things that we have been historically denied through institutional racism.
Krista dice que en muchos países en Europa es gratuito mantenerse uno en el camino académico y ingresarse a la universidad, y existen modelos a nivel mundial, y por qué acá en los Estados Unidos lo estamos haciendo, desempeñando un modelo igual. Y de que sí, en el momento de que la mayoría de latinos y comunidades negras están enfocándose en mejorar el estatus académico, y necesitamos de ahí sacar más préstamos que los otros grupos históricamente, y a esa misma vez está aumentando el costo para ingresarse uno a la universidad. Y Krista dice para ella misma, su historia es de sacar una deuda de 80,000, más su mamá también sacó un préstamo de 15,000, y el nivel que eso impacta a su persona a poder navegar este sistema con esa deuda es bien difícil, pero reconoce también que no estuviera aquí en la radio, enfrente de las cámaras, por medio de Facebook, hablando sobre este tema, siendo directora ejecutiva sin haber obtenido su diploma. Entonces se reconoce las oportunidades de ese diploma de la universidad, lo que otorga, pero a la misma vez esta gran deuda que crea así a pesadillas. Y para mí es una pesadilla a nivel nacional, también para nuestra comunidad como latinos. I think the reality that you shared, Krista, thank you. It's a nightmare to wake up and know that you are $80,000 in debt and you're not making $80,000 upon graduation. For the most part, most are not upon graduating from college. And so it's to me akin to a national nightmare that we should all be concerned and have the means to wake up from and change things. And so what's reason number 5 for canceling this debt?
So we know that it is a bipartisan, that it is the public broadly supports student debt cancellation, bipartisan. We know that across the border, people support student debt cancellation. And we know that institutions have failed us student borrowers, which have created this. We know that servicing companies who are been in charge by the federal government to provide borrowers with information have given borrowers erroneous information. They've given borrowers unethical information, right? So we know that the system from beginning to end is really set up for borrowers to have to borrow more and owe more in the long term, right? So it should not be, in higher education should not be an expensive privilege. It should be a right that we all have access to. This is how we get our educators. This is how in Connecticut, we have a shortage of educators, a shortage of nurses. That would be helped if higher education was much more accessible, if not downright free, and cancellation of student debt. We're part of we're part of the conversation. Now, borrowers, organizers, advocates like ourselves, student loan fund was created by borrowers for borrowers because institutional support was not there. And so we said, how do we show up for ourselves and how do we help ourselves? So all of the news that you're hearing that we'll get into, the public service loan forgiveness program, the cancellation of $10,000 or $20,000 from the Biden administration, that has all really been done from people like you and me who've woken up and said, you know what, this is an unfair practice. It is incredible that we are the only developed nation who has the student debt crisis in the way that we have it, right? And so all of these things that you're seeing from the White House coming in or different programs, these are things that borrowers like you and me have fought really hard to make sure that they happen and that they're available for borrowers.
Krister dice de que el público en general apoya la cancelación de la deuda estudiantil sin importar el partido político, y eso fue un estudio en mayo de 2020, recién. La mayoría apoyan la cancelación de esta deuda y reconoce de que la fortaleza de las personas que están en deuda formaron este grupo Student Loan Fund porque no obtuvieron apoyo de instituciones en cómo navegar con esta deuda, y mientras el costo de el ingreso a la universidad aumenta, también la deuda estudiantil y lo que tienen que terminar pagando está creciendo, y esto tiene que parar. Y para enfatizar también de que la educación debe de ser un derecho para todos que viven aquí en este país, no un privilegio. Y con los cambios que han pasado en los últimos años, está más y más para los privilegiados a nivel económico, cuando debe de ser accesible para todos, porque en este momento, por ejemplo, en Connecticut hay menos personas ya listas para serse profesionales como enfermeras, como maestros, educadores, y necesitamos más gente, profesionales, educados, pero no con tanta deuda. Muchos no deciden esas carreras porque no pagan lo suficiente para poder pagar la deuda, en fin. Y Krista dice que quisiera hablar un poco también sobre la aplicación que este fin de semana está en vivo de parte del gobierno federal con el presidente Biden, ofreciendo una aplicación para los quienes tienen deuda estudiantil, pero hay varios criterios. Entonces, si uno conoce a alguien que no ha terminado la universidad y sacó deuda, eso es para ellos. También si uno se ingresó hace muchos años y terminó hace muchos años, pero si tiene deuda estudiantil, esto es para ellos también. Hay varios criterios. Lamento que nomás tenemos como 8 minutos. Y para más información, vamos a hablar más con Krista, pero no quiero quiero asegurarme de que todos sepan cómo comunicarse con Student Loan Fund, con Krista. Están ofreciendo cada fin de semana, todos los sábados, más durante la semana, hay talleres donde si ustedes tienen preguntas se pueden comunicar directamente con Krista. ¿Y cómo es que el público se puede comunicar contigo? And so Krista is going to share how you can stay in touch, learn more about the Student Loan Fund, as well as more details around the recently released application that the Biden administration mentioned. And there's criteria that you would need to meet in order to apply for the recent relief. And then there's also the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Fund, where the application deadline is coming up. That's the 31st of October, and worthwhile exploring. Again, if you know someone who got indebted for higher education, whether or not they were able to complete it, but no longer enrolled, and they have debt, this is something worthwhile exploring. And William, si puedes compartir en la pantalla la información que sometió Kristen en el chat para que el público se pueda mantener en comunicación con ellos, para aprender más sobre la criteria.
Sí, si quieren ir a www.pslfct.org, esa es una página que hemos creado con uniones, con diferentes sin fines de lucro, que estamos trabajando para dar más información acerca del Public Service Loan Forgiveness Waiver y también información de la cancelación de $20 y $10,000 que anunció el presidente Biden, que son dos cosas diferentes. El primero, de PSLF Waiver, está aquí hasta octubre 31 y es para todos aquellos que tienen préstamos estudiantiles, pero también trabajan para servicios públicos, maestras, maestros, personas que trabajan dependientemente de dónde trabajes. Y la cancelación del presidente Biden es más universal, en que cualquier persona que tuvo acceso a cualquier persona que tenga préstamos estudiantiles pueden cancelar $10 o $20,000 de préstamos estudiantiles dependientemente de que tengan unos requerimientos. No pueden ganar más de $125,000 por individuo o $250,000 por familia. Si quieren saber más información pueden ir a pslfct.org o pueden ir a studentaid.gov. Studentaid.gov es el sitio, la página electrónica de los federales, donde está toda la información que van a necesitar para averiguar más información del waiver y de la aplicación de Biden.
Y algo importante, porque me estás apoyando a navegar personalmente mi deuda estudiantil, y mil gracias por trabajar tan fuerte para nuestra comunidad, inclusive en los sábados. Y algo bien importante que comunicaste conmigo es de que para lo de el Public Service Loan Forgiveness, los quienes estaban trabajando en apoyando a la comunidad en servicio, por ejemplo, como trabajando como maestro o trabajando con una organización sin fines de lucro, hay que tener 10 años de desempeño desde el 2007 en esa área, y si uno no tiene los 10 años en este momento en totalidad, pueden someter la aplicación y seguir trabajando para en servicio a la comunidad, en servicio al público, a llegar a los 10 años. De allí empieza el proceso a recibir esos dólares para cancelar el préstamo estudiantil a cierto nivel. Y eso para mí fue una bendición, porque yo he trabajado 30 años o más para el público con organizaciones sin fines de lucro, pero he trabajado como consultora con organizaciones y no como empleada con las organizaciones sin fines de lucro. Más esos 10 años me va a dar tiempo para aumentar los años y de ahí poder obtener esos fondos. Mil gracias, Crister, por todo lo que has hecho, y quisiera dar una gran gracias a tu mamá por brindar a este mundo una gran bendición para todos. Y por favor, mantenerte en contacto con nosotros, porque esta lucha es de largo plazo para el beneficio de todos, y va a requerir la voz de todos también para cambiar, a reconstruir una nueva visión del acceso de educación acá en Connecticut y también a nivel nacional. And Krister, thank you so much for being here with us, and please, I hope people take advantage of communicating with you, because you have supported me so much, and especially when you shared with me this Saturday, hardworking, making accessible this information. You made my day when you said, if you haven't reached the 10 years required for the public service loan forgiveness clock, you can submit the application if you know you're continuing in the realm of public service, that you submit the application on the 31st, and the clock will continue ticking, so that when you complete your 10, you will get the funds to support and reducing the student debt. Thank you so much, Christopher, and many blessings to your mom. Just so grateful for your existence in this world, and for folks who are interested in supporting this long-term effort. It's still a long ways to go in reconstructing and re-envisioning what it would look like to truly invest in people who want to make a difference in this world through education. So, thank you, Krista.
Un placer, gracias por tenernos organizando para cancelar los préstamos estudiantiles y para tener una liberación colectiva, ¿verdad? Para poder estar libre colectivamente y show up for one another. So I appreciate the space and the ability to be here. And we're here if folks have questions, and you know, we have partnerships and folks we can put you in contact with if you need further support. So glad to be here.
Great, and so please check out the website and sign up for a workshop to learn more if you qualify or if you know loved ones that do.
Yeah.
Thank you. So see you next time, Krista. Please reach out if there's anything that we can do. Every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. we're here and accessible for the community by folks in the community.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Nos están escuchando a través de WNHH 103.5 FM LP, La Voz Hispana Radio.
Estás escuchando La Voz Hispana de Connecticut.
Aún no he decidido sobre la vacuna COVID-19. Me pongo muy nerviosa porque eso es algo nuevo.
Yo vacuné a todos. Los niños han perdido mucho estos últimos años. Quería asegurarme de que puedan divertirse con sus amigos sin enfermarse. También
William.
Sí,
Gracias, William.
Sí. Oye, no pasamos más del tiempo.
5 minutos más. Ay.
Cuando había comenzado ahora, bueno,
Este mensaje es presentado por el Departamento de Salud de New Haven y cuenta con el apoyo financiero de
estos comerciales tienen que aparecer siempre
CDC.
en el tiempo.
Antes. Ay.
No, para la
Sí,
próxima.
como 5 minutos, como 3:55.
CDC,
Y como no estamos saliendo en media
por el
hora del
gobierno
corte,
de los
ya
Estados
estamos
Unidos.
llegando hasta 50.
Ah, ok. 50. Ok,
50,
50.
por ahí.
Ok, gracias. Hasta luego. Bye.